when we grow in our knowledge of the justification for God actually existing, knowing the reasons why, God exists, the evidence for his existence, all of that stuff, knowing his characteristics, his attributes, having confidence that the Bible is his word and gives us knowledge of reality and gives us knowledge of him, getting to know Trinitarian doctrine, those kinds of things, all of that helps strengthen our faith in God. Okay, Erin, all this week, our listeners have been anxiously anticipating this episode. In fact, we probably should have just released this episode back to back, so they would have had to wait so long, because this entire week they have not been able to equip their young people with truth because we didn't give them any practical steps. So, hey, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast, make sure you go back and listen to the podcast on truth and teaching our kids about, or really understanding. It was really first on us understanding the nature of truth and reality. Truth is correspondence. Truth corresponds to reality. And if you don't have the truth, you embrace false ideas, those ideas are going to have consequences, okay? But we want to get practical today. How do we teach the truth in very practical ways? How do we reinforce it? How do we kind of create cultures of truth in our homes, our families, our churches, our schools? And so that's what we want to get to today, is just practical steps, okay? So, number one, no, I was setting you up. I said, number one, jump right into it, Erin.
Okay, so first of all, we want to teach our kids what truth is. And I mean, in some ways, kids know what truth is. We know this because they start to tell lies to try to get away with stuff. So they know what truth is. But as far as really teaching them, what this thing called truth is and why it's important, I think one way to think about it is, in the last episode, I mentioned the book Story of Reality by Greg Koukl. And in the book, he talks about changing our view. Possibly we might need to, if we view Christianity as just a story among other stories, and kind of faith as just this blind thing. This faith is just really hoping and wishing that this stuff is true, but we don't really have, good evidence to. And this is what I read through, as I mentioned, with middle school and high school students, and it talked about shifting the way we think about Christianity, that it is making claims about truth, that the Bible doesn't start once upon a time, like a story, like a fairy tale. It starts in the beginning. So Christianity is a worldview that is making claims about reality. Now, whether or not it's true or not, that's, another question. But
Let's
Christianity itself, yes,
clarify what it's doing.
It's making claims about reality. It's not just the Bible doesn't present this view as a fairy tale. It presents it as this is what has happened. This is what's going to happen, and this is reality. Yeah.
In fact, I think the subtitle of Greg's book is How the World Began, How It Ends, and Everything that happens in between.
Yeah.
So it's a description of reality. Christianity is a description of reality. So this is what we mean when we say you've got to teach what the truth is. You have to explicitly teach what truth is. And then when we kind of understand truth is that which corresponds to reality, now then we connect it back to faith. Because we have these other ideas in Christianity that are interconnected, and there's this, dynamic interplay between them. And if you get one of those concepts wrong, it could actually undermine your Christianity. So, for instance, faith. Faith is wishful thinking, or faith is believing things when there's no evidence, or faith is believing in something that you just can't prove. Right? Those ideas and those definitions of faith are out there in the church. And I'm no longer surprised when Christians define faith as something like that. And, sometimes it's not necessarily our fault. We haven't been trained well. We haven't been taught well. We've been given false views. Sometimes it's our fault because we've just simply absorbed the culture. We haven't been thoughtful believers. So nonetheless, we need to untangle from these false ideas. If you have a view that faith is wishful thinking, or it's a preference, we have our faith. The Muslim has their faith. The Buddhist has their faith. And everyone's faith is equally, valid. And it's just, what really matters is what you believe and how sincerely you believe it and things like that. Well, that's a mistaken notion of faith, right? Go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen, right? You see Scripture all of the time bringing faith and knowledge and faith and truth together. The Bible never pulls those things apart. In fact, think about Mark chapter 2, where Jesus is healing the paralytic, and he says, so that you may know, right? He does a miracle. He connects this miraculous act, this act of evidence, this proof, with our knowledge that this stuff is real and true. I think about Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, if the resurrection didn't happen, in verses 12 through 19, he says, basically, if the resurrection didn't happen, your faith is futile. This is a waste of time. Christians should be pitied because we're putting our faith in something that did not actually happen. It would be like going to a church where you visit one Sunday and they're singing songs. Like, there's a worship band and they're singing songs, but you're noticing the lyrics. The lyrics they're singing songs about a little boy who dresses up in a green suit and who flies around in the air. You're like, this is odd. And then the pastor gets up after the worship time and he opens up a book and he reads a chapter out of this book and he starts teaching out of this book. And he teaches, and you realize the book is Peter Pan. And he teaches some good moral lesson about, following the example of Peter Pan. If you were at the first church of Peter Pan and that was what was going on, would you stay there? Would you come back? Well, no. It might be entertaining, but you would not go there and commit your life to this because it's a fairy tale. It's not true. And the Christian faith is putting our faith in that which is true and real, and evidence and logic and rationality. All of these things help us to know that Christianity is true. And even how we're talking about this right now may strike some Christians as odd, because they're just not, you may not be around people who talk this way. And so talking about Christianity as this knowledge tradition, it's very intellectual. We should be talking about logic and rationality. This might strike you as odd, but this is the biblical view. These things are not taken apart, they're put together. So here's maybe a simple definition of faith. Faith is trusting in what you have good reason to believe is true. That's the biblical picture.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, because I've been reading in the Old Testament lately, and I'm thinking about how this is the theme in the Old Testament too. And like reading in Isaiah lately, and and other prophets too that would come, especially during like 1 Kings, 2 Kings, the history of Israel during that time. And there would be these warnings of like, this is what God's going to do. And let me remind you of what God's done. And it constantly goes back to, remember what God did here. A lot of the times when God is reminding the people of Israel about himself and his power, he goes to, I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you out of Egypt. That was this miracle that God performed. And he's pointing back to that evidence. Do you remember what I did? I have the power to do that and more. And this is what I'm going to do. And so even in the Old Testament too, there's this pattern of God pointing back to and his prophets pointing back to this is what God has done. You have good reason to believe that the God that you're following is true because you have seen with your own eyes what he's done. And then generations later, you have been told what your ancestors saw with their own eyes. You have good reason to believe that it's true. And so if we have changed the way that we present God and faith to our kids, we need to go back to the way that the Bible portrays God and faith to our kids and make sure that's how we see it ourselves.
Yeah, well, JP Moreland, who we talked about last week, and I mentioned this book, The Kingdom Triangle, and he talks about recovering the Christian mind. And he really talks about Christianity as this knowledge tradition. It's not a faith tradition, it's a knowledge tradition. It's not mere belief, it actually gives us knowledge of reality. Well, he points out in the book that the New Testament talks more about knowledge than it does about faith. And those things are intricately connected. And, a lot of times when I talk about this, like if I'm doing a talk for a group, I'll give an example and I'll talk about how we see this and we just kind of assume this and go with this when we're talking about like our relationships with one another. So I'll give the example of, our marriage. And my question is, when is our faith in one another strongest? So we dated for 1.5 years, and then we were engaged for 5 months. So almost 2 years of dating and engagement before we walked down the aisle, right? And I mean, you couldn't wait to get down that aisle. And so when you got to that point where we were getting married, would you say at our wedding ceremony, our faith in each other was stronger then? Or now after 25 years of marriage, is it stronger now? Mm-hmm. Now, of course, the people will give us the benefit of the doubt and they'll say, well, stronger now, of course. And the actual answer is, well, it depends, doesn't it? Let's say that first 2 years of dating and engagement, I mean, you just put your best foot forward, Erin. You just, you snowed me.
I don't like this example.
You deceived me. And you made me think you were honest and sacrificial and giving and loyal and faithful and a woman of virtue and honest and all of that stuff. And let's say we get married and I start gaining knowledge now in our first year of marriage that you're none of those things, that you were deceptive. And you'd say, well, I'm going here. And then I would discover you went over there. And there's money missing from our bank account. And you're not sacrificial. You're not giving. You're lazy. And you want me to go on?
No.
Oh, okay. Now, thankfully.
I hate this example.
No, because it has a happy ending.
You could give the example that you were the one who did that.
I could, but that'd be completely implausible. Okay. So, no, it has a happy ending.
Oh. I
always say, well, thankfully, that's not the case. And then the audience is like gasp, like in relief. Oh, thank goodness. No, thankfully, that's not the case. What has happened over the last 25 years of marriage is I have gained knowledge and I have gained evidence and I have gained additional reasons and justification that have helped me to know that you are sacrificial and honest and faithful and giving and loyal and on and on and on. And so what has happened to my faith as I've grown in my knowledge of your goodness, right?
Now I like the example.
My faith has increased exponentially. So now when I travel, I'm on the road, I'm not worried about what's going on at home because I have absolute faith in you. I have such a high level of faith, such a high degree of faith and confidence in you, trust in what I have good reason to believe is true, that you are all of these things, that I'm not worried. And so knowledge, evidence, reason, all of that has strengthened our relationship. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, that's how it is with God. When we grow in our knowledge of who God is, when we grow in our knowledge of the justification for God actually existing, knowing the reasons why God exists, the evidence for his existence, all of that stuff, knowing his characteristics, his attributes, having confidence that the Bible is his word and gives us knowledge of reality and gives us knowledge of him, getting to know Trinitarian doctrine, those kinds of things, all of that helps strengthen our faith in God. And so as we talk about truth and teach what truth is, we need to connect these things for our kids.
Yeah, and you think about how powerful that is to present it this way to our children, so that even if one day they want, we all have rebellious hearts. If they want to reject Christianity, you could see how it's going to be a little more difficult, because their whole lives we've been talking to them about Christianity this way. Now, they could still reject it, of course, but you could at least say, hey, your whole life we've been giving you all these reasons why Christianity is true. You're saying you're going to walk away. Well, what reasons do you have that it's false?
Yeah.
And again, it's not like that's not even possible, but you think about how different that conversation is when our kids have doubts, when they have struggles. It's harder to walk away. I mean, I know, I'm just thinking of my own life when I came to faith, and then as I've learned not only scripture, but then apologetics and reasons to believe the scripture is true, and how that solidified my faith. And so even when there are really hard times and I really am frustrated that something happened or whatever, and I'm kind of crying out to God, it's hard. It would be really difficult for me to just walk away, because it's like I know God
too much.
is true. Yeah,
You know too much.
I know too much. And so you think about the impact that this can have on our kids if we frame it from the beginning, or if we haven't framed it that way, changing the way we frame it. This way it is such it's the true way to frame it, but it's also a really good way to talk about it with our kids.
Yeah. And so I'm just thinking of how to summarize this and give some practical steps of what we've just said. Okay, we've said, all right, step number one in being practical is teach what the truth is. And like, here would be the subpoints. Number one, maybe the first thing you've got to do is reevaluate how you conceive of the Christian faith. Maybe you've been raised up in overly experiential or anti-intellectual versions of evangelical Christianity. And that has shaped your views on this in incorrect ways and in unbiblical ways. And so you might need to reevaluate how you even conceive of the Christian faith. That might be step number one, so that you can then teach the kids. Number two, I would say you mentioned apologetics. Teaching apologetics should be a necessary, essential, vital part of our discipleship of our young people. By the time they are in middle school, if not sooner, we should be giving them a regular, healthy dose of apologetics. And if you don't know anything of apologetics, then you've got some learning to do. And there's a ton of good apologetic resources out there. We mentioned a number, but making apologetics an essential part. In fact, here would be a good resource on that one. Go to maventruth.com. That's Maven's website. And if you go to our video content there, we have a 6-session video curriculum that you can do with your students. It's good for middle school, high school, college, adults. We've had adults take it and teach it in their adult Sunday school class. It's 6 video sessions. They're about 45 minutes each, the videos. It's plug and play. We provide you with a PDF notebook that you can print out for all the participants. It's got outlines they can keep track with the lectures. There's review questions, and then there's discussion questions. That's plug and play. 6 sessions right there to lay a foundation, okay? Yeah. And then the third thing I would say, which we've been talking about, but I want to just make this explicit. I think there's a practical way to maybe reshape our kids' views of the faith and of truth, but we need to start using more cognitive language. And I think what that's going to do is that's going to help create a culture that's going to be different. And I hope, and I think we would say we've accomplished that in our home, where we talk about the faith in ways where we appeal to rationality. We talk logically. We talk about proof and evidence. We talk about backing up your claims. We talk about the intellect. We talk about all of these things, and we approach the faith very intellectually. And so when you use that cognitive language, that communicates an emphasis. It communicates a view. And I think a lot of times we simply pass on a view by the language that we use. And so we'll talk about the faith and we'll talk about passion and feelings and emotions and intense desire and commitment. And all those things are good, but if you overemphasize those things, then you lose the rich intellectual side of Christianity, and you lose powerful tools to equip your kids and to engage this world. And so those are practical ways on teaching them the truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to teaching kids truth, I think we start with how we talk about the truth, God, Christianity, all those things.
Yeah.
The next thing is, I think that we as parents make a commitment to live in truth, to live out truth in our own lives. So what do I mean? So I mean that when our kids see us modeling life, that they see that we are truth tellers, that they see in our interactions with other people that we tell the truth.
Whoa, you're getting personal here.
I know.
You mean we actually have to live this out?
We have to live this out. And I think this is a really powerful way that we communicate to our kids that truth is a pillar of our home, is that we speak the truth. We tell the truth all the time. And so I'm thinking about, like, we're not the kind of parents that when our 3-year-old turns 3 and can't get into Disneyland free anymore, we don't lie to the ticket person and say they're 3 and all the older kids see that we do that.
Yeah. Now, you just brought up a whole nother controversial issue.
Oh, what?
We take our kids to Disneyland.
Oh, my gosh.
I thought we were Christians. Didn't we just do an episode on this?
We did.
You better go back and listen to our episode. Disneyland, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens.
I think about the movies. Okay, so your kid turns 12, so they don't get kids admission anymore. I'm talking about, this is what I'm talking about, in really little and small ways, and then in big ways, that they don't hear us lying to grandma and saying, "Oh, we were sick, sorry we couldn't come over." We weren't sick. They hear us say that. I mean, I could think of like a million examples. Just to be clear,
in case Grandma's listening, Grandma, we've never done that.
We were sick.
We can't even get our story straight. Okay, we lied.
This was a hypothetical.
Let's just
okay,
be honest
we didn't lie to Grandma. So this is what I'm talking about in little ways that they see. When we get too much change at the store, they see that we give it back. When we forgot to pay, I mean, this has happened a couple times. I don't know how it's happened to me several times, but I'll walk out of the store and something's like in the bottom of the cart and I didn't scan it or whatever. And oh man, it's so tempting to just be like, oh my gosh, this is like a $3 thing. Like, throw it in the car, let's go. I spend thousands of dollars of here, they won't. That they see that we say, oh shoot, I forgot to pay. Okay, let's run back in. I need to pay.
I'm kind of hung up on what you said before that. Like, what? You spend thousands of dollars where? Which store is this?
Oh, whatever.
Okay.
So this is what I mean. And actually, you know what, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about how during COVID, we live in California. There were the lockdowns, mask mandates, there were all these things. And so we had lots of conversations with our kids about what is true and what are we obliged to do as citizens. And so, for example, okay, so stores had the mask mandate or whatever. Okay, but then it was like some stores were doing it, some stores weren't. It's kind of, so we we had friends who, if they were asked to put on a mask, they would say, "Oh, I can't for health reasons." So our kids were like, "We don't want to wear masks. Can we just tell the store that we can't wear masks for health reasons?" Now, maybe you disagree with us on this, but I said, "No, we're not going to lie to the store clerk." But if you don't want to wear a mask, you can not wear a mask, and then if you're asked to, then put a mask on.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But we talked about it, and we said, no, we're not going to lie, but and we'll oblige when we have to, like going on a plane, things like that. It's like we have to do it, so we're going to oblige. And so we had so many great conversations, I think, about when is it appropriate to be civilly disobedient. When do we comply? And is it justified to lie? I mean, there are times, I think, where it's justified to
not to lie.
To lie. No, not to lie. Sorry.
To deceive.
But to not tell the truth and to someone in a situation. Like, of course, there's all kinds of examples that I could think of. But life and death situations, I think of Corrie ten Boom. Hiding Nazis, the Jews in her closet when the Nazis come to the door. Are you hiding Jews? No, I'm not hiding Jews.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I think we ought to do a podcast on that. We should do a podcast on thinking about, telling the truth, lying. Mm-hmm. Are there ever justifications for it?
Yeah.
What is lying? Is lying the same thing as deceiving, or is deceiving the same thing as lying?
Yeah.
Making some of those careful distinctions. And so we were talking about that kind of stuff. And so we do believe there are justified deceptions. This wasn't one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about good friends of ours that have had a really terrible situation with TSA when they were going through an airport. And their young minor daughter was basically threatened with a pat down, and her genitals were going to be patted down. And the dad, of course, was upset. He said, "Pat me down instead. You do not pat her down." Anyways, so as a family, they've taken the position that even though she's now not as young,
it's 12 and under.
Yeah, don't get the pat downs. If a parent
doesn't give consent, then they can't pat them down.
So they've decided as a family, well, we're going to still say that she's under this age because we want to protect her from any kind of violation of her body.
Yeah.
Okay, that to me is justifiable deception. They say, no, she's 12 and she's really 14 or whatever the case may be. And it's to protect her from a great harm that could happen to her. So that's what we mean by times for deception.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm just thinking through what you're saying, and I think hopefully what we're exhibiting is a commitment to the truth.
Yeah.
We want to be so careful, and we want to be so committed to the truth that we carefully think through these things. We want to live them out. We want to say, are there times where it's justified to deceive or not? And think those things carefully through, because we want to live out a commitment to the truth. And in doing so, we not only model this, but we create a culture in our family, and we help secure the truthfulness of our kids and their commitment to the truth. Because truth is not merely these abstract ideas and concepts and a philosophical view, but it ultimately has to be lived out. In fact, think about what Romans says, what Paul says in Romans 1:18. What do? We suppress the truth in unrighteousness, in our sin. And so we will deny the truth in our sin. And I think this is kind of what you were talking about earlier when you talked about, well, it's possible to walk away from the faith, but when you help lay this foundation, it makes it a little more difficult. Because now you're going to have to admit, I'm suppressing the truth in my sin, because it really isn't that I don't believe this stuff intellectually, or I don't have a strong case for this intellectually. No, it's actually a moral reason. I just don't want to live this way. I don't want to submit my life to God.
Which can happen.
His truth.
Which can happen.
Yeah.
Which is why, there are no guarantees, but this is why, if you think about building a house, you're fortifying the house. You're building it with pretty strong beams. You're laying a good foundation. The house could still crumble.
Yes.
The kids are going to make their own decisions. Eventually, they're going to be adults. They're going to have to decide.
Yeah, but we can get some real clarity on what the reason is the house crumbled.
Yes, yes, for sure. And we can, I think, say with a clear conscience, we laid a good foundation, and that's really our job as parents. We were faithful to lay a good foundation,
and then the kids have their own responsibility to put their faith in the truth, in the truth of Christ. So this is why, and I guess this would be a sub point, but it's a practical step of this living out a commitment to the truth, modeling it. But so we place a high value on truth. And so whether you're in the context of a school, a church, a family, placing a high value on speaking the truth can be huge. So that's why in the Kunkel house, like lying is a big deal. Lying is a big deal, and that is a crime that is punishable by death in our family, right? We take that one seriously.
I know. I was like, whoa.
No,
it is. Yeah, it's
like
one of the biggest. I mean, I'm trying to think of. Lying to us, getting caught, lying, but lying to us is a huge sin.
It's a cause for the destruction of our child's life. Okay, let's just put it that way. No, we make that one.
Yeah,
that's
a
momentous.
big deal. Yeah,
that lying is no small thing because of what's at stake, because of the trust that's necessary for good relationships, because we want to instill such a commitment to the truth. We want there to be a commitment to the truth, such that even if it costs you, you're still that committed to the truth. Now. Are all our kids there? No, of course not.
Do our kids
you're like,
lie? Of
people
course
are thinking,
they've lied.
oh wow, their kids must be amazing, so committed to the truth. No,
that's why we said.
But that's our commitment. That's what we're aspiring for, right?
That's why we said when they lie, because of course they have lied, and maybe we should do a whole episode on lying and how we've handled it in really practical ways. But just to say. In a Christian home where truth is a cornerstone, lying should be a big deal, and not letting our kids get away with that. I mean, I think that's kind of the commitment we made early on, was that when they got caught lying, even about something little, not eating their broccoli, not putting away their toys, not brushing their teeth when they said they did, we stopped and we made it a big, that was a big deal. We investigated.
We confirmed
we found
the lie.
The broccoli in the trash can and brought about justice. But we kind of made a commitment early on. Like that's a big deal. And we weren't going to let little lies slide.
Yes, it's always those little steps of compromise that lead to the big steps. Yeah. So that's huge. We make it a big deal in our house. I think another way that we put a high value on speaking the truth in our home is just how we deal with some of the conflict resolution with the kids. Like, our kids are fighting about something. Well, one of the first steps is to stop and let's talk this out and try to get to the truth. Like, let's get to the truth of the matter here. And we won't merely validate the kids' feelings, no matter what they are. Now, doesn't mean that there's not a place for, misperceptions and exploring feelings. But we have a commitment to the truth that takes precedence over what you feel. Doesn't mean your feelings aren't important, but what we ultimately have to do is submit our feelings to the truth. And so are there truths out there about what you did to your brother or what you did to your sister or how you spoke to them in a rude, condescending way or whatever it might be that you have to face? And it doesn't matter where you're at in your feelings, you've got to face the truth. And that's an important piece in conflict resolution, is dealing with the truth. Right?
And this is so difficult because oftentimes, I mean, I don't know about you guys listening, but the kids, two siblings are fighting again. Like again, they're fighting, and you're just done. You're so sick of it. And so the temptation is to go in and be like, I don't care what happened. Go to your rooms.
You're both
in trouble. Blah, 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 blah. So that's the temptation. And maybe sometimes you do need to separate for a little while.
Sometimes we need to separate you from the kids.
Get a little time out for yourself. But always once maybe emotions have calmed down, and mom's emotions too, that you come back and say, okay, what happened? And you hear from one side, and the other sibling's not allowed to interrupt. No, you talk, okay, and then you talk. And we have had times where the first one who talked, well, she hit me, da 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 da, and then the other one says something that's contradictory. I'm sure this has never happened in anyone's home who's listening. And so it's like, I will say, she said that you hit her. Did you hit her? And, that maybe the wobbling because they said they didn't, and then it's like, no, I need to know, did you hit her or not? You either hit her or you didn't, and I need to know the truth. Yep. And so it's helping to figure out the things that actually happened, and then, of course, figuring out how to help them to reconcile, but that we're even in conflict pursuing the truth. And I think it's important because the kid who's been wronged wants justice to happen. It's like it really stinks when your brother does something to you that's unjust
and gets away with it.
And so you want justice. Well, the only way to get justice is for truth to prevail.
Yeah, justice requires truth.
And so parents have to care about the truth when it comes to conflict within siblings. And that our kids see that the truth matter. Okay, that does matter. You started that with your sister. She was just sitting there minding her own business. You are at fault here, and you need to apologize to her. That's not fair.
And if you think about it, I mean, we're talking about truth and all this, but this has a deep relationship to our spiritual lives and our relationship with the Lord, right? Because in that commitment to the truth, in that acknowledgement of the truth, what are we going to find? We're going to find we suppress the truth in unrighteousness, that we lie, that we're sinners. And that's a necessary truth to recognize, so that we recognize we need to repent, right? So a commitment to the truth runs really deep, runs us right into the gospel. And we need to lay that foundation so our kids understand the gospel, that there are true moral laws that exist, and there's a moral lawgiver who's given those to us, and that is God. And we've violated those things, and we're guilty. And see, the commitment to truth builds the necessary framework for the gospel. In a relativistic culture where everything is subjective, and you've got your truth and I've got my truth, well, then the gospel just kind of disappears. There's no need for it because there's no sin, because there's no moral law. There's no objective moral law that anyone can violate. There's no breaking of the law, and it just, sin's out the door. And if sin's out the door, the gospel loses its power. There's no good news because there's nothing you need to be rescued from. And so as we teach them about truth, ultimately submitting to the truth about reality, which is submitting to God, because God is the creator of reality. And so we are helping them to submit their lives to that which is God's truth and reality. So there's a relationship there. I think we want to always connect it back to who God is, and the fact that we're living in his world, his reality that we don't create. So those are some practical steps. Okay. Yeah. There's another one. Here's another practical step. We talk about narrating what we see around us. And this is a really good tool. We're going to talk about it all the time because we use it a lot. But sometimes what we mean by narrating is providing an account or providing commentary to our kids about what's happening around us, right? What's going on around us. And so, for instance, when maybe one of their friends is lying to them or to us, and then we will narrate that. We'll provide commentary on what's going on. How does that feel when you're lied to? And what do you experience there? And how do you know it's a lie? Well, because it doesn't correspond to reality. It doesn't match up with what's really true. And, and those kinds of things. So we can narrate those kind of things.
Yeah. And this again taps into what our kids know is true. This is why teaching them truth really, it isn't really that difficult. Of course, as they get older, we can get more philosophical and all of those things. But for young kids, teaching them about truth is actually quite easy, because it's like, I saw the kid lie to the teacher. Well, what's a lie? They know I saw this happen, and then they said something else happened. And this is just a really easy way to narrate all the stuff that's around us all the time. I know another fun for me, a fun way that I've liked to narrate with the kids. So here's just a very practical example. So when elections are coming up, as you know, and anyone who knows me know, I make our kids watch the presidential debates.
Erin is a political buff.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, you're a political expert. You should be on
sure.
CNN or Fox News.
So I make the kids watch the debates. And what I will do a lot is pause it, or sometimes we'll go back later. But I'll pause. Okay, so Trump makes a claim.
Wait, you're back at Trump? He's no longer our president.
That was the last election. Okay, so Trump makes this claim. The economy's best it's ever been in American history, or something. Or Biden makes a claim about poverty is the worst it's ever been in American poverty. More people are poor today. I'm just giving an example. I have no idea. No, he didn't say it. But more people are poor today than when Trump became president. Pause.
Different claims are made.
Okay, guys, what did he just say? More people are poor. Okay, he's making a claim about reality. It's either true or false that more people are poor. So is that true? And so sometimes, they'll make claims about things that we know are true or not true. Or sometimes it'll be like, okay, look it up. Let's look it up and see what the numbers are. And so I love doing this. And I've done it with all kinds of different politicians who make claims. And I'll pull up the clip. And we've also done this with debates between Christians and atheists and all kinds of ways. So narrating stuff in the culture that's happening and helping our kids to stop. Okay, what claim was made? Is that claim true? How can we find out if it's true?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's all kinds of ways you can use narrating, which is just a really good tool, whether you're teaching about truth or whether you're teaching about worldview. It's just, as you grow in your ability to know truth and understand the Christian faith and think in these kinds of ways, then it gives you the ability to see more around you. And I may have used this analogy before on the podcast, but I think it's such a helpful analogy. It's like the NFL quarterback. The first time, they get into an NFL game, they talk about how fast the game is moving, and they didn't see lots of things that were going on. As they study, as they prep, as they practice over the years, they'll say the game has slowed down. And that doesn't literally mean people stopped running as fast as they used to. What it means is they are seeing a lot more. And in the same way, as we study and prep and train and equip ourselves, the game slows down. We see a whole lot more. We can identify, those ideas in a movie that we're watching with the kids that are antithetical to the Christianity. We can see those actions and we can narrate for it and provide commentary on it versus just kind of being caught up in everything and just going along with the culture. Yeah. This is so vital so that we don't just get pulled by the current of culture.
Yeah, and this is how we equip our kids, in that same way, for the game to slow down for them to see what's happening. We're equipping them to know how to think.
Yeah.
And that's such a vital tool. To know how to think is so valuable. And so it's part of the ways that we equip them to do that.
Yeah. And I would say one last practical idea is just dinner conversations. Make sure that you're sitting down having family dinners and that you're intentional to talk about this stuff. And, to talk about truth. And to, maybe you bring up the question, okay, what is truth, kids? And of course, maybe the kids roll their eyes. Oh, come on, Dad, we're going to go. No, seriously, what is truth? You guys need to get grounded in this. We need to think carefully about this. And maybe you just discover where your kids are at on all this. Maybe the question is, okay, do you guys think that Christianity is true? Or do you think that Christianity offers a true account of reality? Why or why not? And maybe if your kids are like, yeah, and they, okay, force them to defend it, have those kinds of conversations at the dinner table, or bring up a current event. Say, what do you guys think about this? Or, maybe the documentary that we talked about last week, What is a Woman? You watch that together, and then you make that part of the conversation.
Although that's documentary is not for little kids. For sure.
That's true.
There's
That's true.
definitely
You're teenagers.
Sexual conversations. And we watched it with our older, I just want to preface and say, don't sit down with the 8-year-old and watch the film.
Thank you.
There might be little parts you can watch with them, but.
Yeah, no, you just saved us from some angry emails from parents. So I appreciate that, honey.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So those are really practical ways. And what we're trying to do is equip our kids with the truth, which is absolutely vital in a post-truth culture. And ultimately, all of this, I think we want to make sure that in this larger framework, right, it all is pointing back to the truth of God, who God is and what is the gospel, the truth of the gospel. That's where it all goes back to. And this stuff is necessary foundation to get them back to the truth of God's story of reality. Maven exists to help the next generation know truth, pursue goodness, and create beauty for the cause of Christ. To find out more, check out maventruth.com.